If you haven't followed the podcast yet and don't know who I am, I'm Chris Wright, the head of the PUBS Advisory Service. I provide insights into the UK pubs trade, I speak with other experts, and I share experiences and stories from publicans across the country. Along the way, we'll explore different pubs, how they're run, and speak with their operators. Podcasts are released weekly, and you can contribute to the podcast using WhatsApp. Just message us on 07766073815. Leave your story in the form of a voice message or voice note. 5 minutes is approximately the maximum time limit. If you get cut off or have a longer story, just message back and continue where you left off. Please include as much detail about your experience as possible and avoid recording in noisy places or a moving vehicle. If you run a pub business, I highly recommend subscribing to the PUBS Advisory Service. It's the most extensive pub service, offering more than just representation. We have online calculators, document banks, and other resources for those interested in or already running a pub business. You can even claim the cost of subscribing back as a business expense. Some of the WhatsApp content will make it to special episodes of our podcast, exclusive only to subscribers of the PUBS Advisory Service. This paid subscription also gives you early and advert-free access to our episodes, plus online sessions where I answer your questions about the industry.
Hello, this is Chris from the Our Pubs podcast, and today I'm joined by Hayley Tansey, who is the White Lion Hotel in Hebden Bridge. It's looking sparkling up there, Hayley. I can see the sun streaming through your windows in the background. I'm sure you haven't done that just for us. But anyway, you are in Hebden Bridge, right up in the north of England. You've been there since 2017, running this venue, and you've had to adapt to quite a few changes in that period, even though it's not quite a decade, but there's been a lot to learn, a lot to do. You've suffered COVID, just like so many other venues did around the country. And I really wanted to sit down and chat with you, Hayley, because I've always found dealing with you so professional. I mean, entrepreneurial doesn't cut it, I'll be honest with you. I'm really looking forward to coming up and staying one day and seeing everything you do up there. So, tell us a bit about why this venue? Why did you go to the White Lion and not somewhere else?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for your complimentary introduction. The White Lion, Hebden Bridge. So I was brought up in nearby area to Hebden Bridge, although Hebden Bridge has evolved considerably since I was a kid. It's now a really trendy, sort of alternative, diverse sort of community. Lots going on, big music scene at the Trades Club. There's always lots of parades, vintage car shows, steampunk, you name it, it comes to Hebden Bridge. So there's always something going on. Sometimes it's very weird and wonderful. Lots of artisans, lots of galleries and sort of personal work that goes on there with, pottery and textiles, all sorts of stuff. So it's a really interesting place to be at. We get a lot of tourism. There's been a lot of filming in the area. So we had Happy Valley, and Sally Wainwright's just finished another bout of filming there with a new drama series called Riot Women. So we tend to be sort of front and center for a lot of local filming. So again, brings people into the area, creates more tourism. It makes it a healthy sort of business environment, because all of the shops within Hebden Bridge are all independent. So it's really a nice community to be part of. And, when the sun shines in God's own country, even better.
Even better, yeah. So very much, as you say, Hebden's become a destination for people that are looking for something independent, not mainstream, and that does scream across. It feels a bit to me like the Glastonbury of the North. Not having visited myself, but I'm getting those vibes. Maybe you haven't got so many wizards and warlocks wandering in the streets, but
yeah,
I'm gonna say there's a few.
It is quite weird and wonderful.
Now that's good. So the travellers that come, you obviously got people that just pop in for the day. You obviously cater for people that want to come and stay. You've got rooms. And some of these travelers, obviously, with you fleetingly, maybe an overnight, and others perhaps for a longer period. I mean, how have you seen people staying in Hebden Bridge? Has that changed a lot in this last decade, since you've been operating there?
No, not really, because we get people that will just come and stay for Saturday night. So they'll be in and around Hebden through the day, have a good night out, and then they leave on the Sunday. We've got people who'll stay for the week because there are lots of areas in and around Hebden Bridge. So you've got Haworth, which is Bronte country, 20 minutes away by bus from there. We're on the Pennine Way. We get a lot of walkers that are stopping midpoint. There's a lot of the Spire runs that happen. So there's so much that passes through that point. And Hebden Bridge, like the White Lion, has been the heart really of Hebden Bridge since 1657 when it was built. And that was the point where lots of travellers used to stop to rest horses, to pick up goods. It was part of the sort of stagecoach mail stop. So it's always been, for hundreds of years, a place where travellers came, to eat, drink, and rest their heads. And so that still happens today.
It feels like you describe it almost like you're on a bit of a crossroads, east, west, and north, south travelers. So you kind of get the best of all worlds. I mean, right outside your venue is the river.
Yes.
And how have you found the river? Has that been a challenge for you? Have you had issues with that? Does it flood? What's been going on there?
So there's quite a controversial amount of work that's being proposed by the Environment Agency at the moment, which will disrupt Hebden Bridge a lot, and a lot of the businesses will be disrupted. In 1657, whoever built the White Lion, which was King's Farm at the time, knew exactly where they were putting it, because most of Hebden Bridge at that point would have been floodplain. And thankfully, and touching wood, the White Lion has never flooded in its history, because it's slightly on an incline. So we've missed, there was a biblical flood 10 years ago now in Hebden Bridge, where lots and lots of businesses were absolutely devastated. There was a huge community sort of pulled together, and everybody helped everybody out to get back up and running as quickly as possible. White Lion, we weren't affected, but and it was not in my remit at the time. But the previous owner made sure there was coffee, soup, place for people to come in when they'd been sweeping up mud and God knows what from, the rest of the businesses. So when there is flooding, which thankfully hasn't been to that extent since, that there is a big community pulled together to get everybody sort of back up and running as soon as possible. So it's a really nice part of the world to be part of in that respect.
Well, it's interesting because I get the impression that the community there in Hebden Bridge is quite thick. Everybody kind of knows everybody, and there's a lot of connectedness. I mean, do you find it? I mean, clearly, it can be hard to be all things to all people. You're dealing with people that fleetingly come. You're dealing with people that live there, work there. How do you manage to straddle those two groups, the community and the people that are just passing through? You seem to offer it so well. How have you managed to do it?
Well, as some of it is just trial and error about, you kind of get a feel for what you think people want, but, sometimes that needs to be adapted. And I think that's the key to this industry. You have to always be looking at what you can offer. So, we've had to put a lot of money into upgrading the rooms, and, especially after COVID, where, everybody's business just stopped, especially hospitality. It was the weirdest time that I've ever experienced, where just nobody went out. And I think that then that being flexible and looking at different ways of offering the same things, we provide a pub menu where there are things that people, you know, would expect to find on a coaching in menu. We also have got an a la carte restaurant which offers a tasting menu and various, you know, elements of 3-course dining. We people are able to book us for weddings, small parties. So we do really have to be all things to all people and try and work out an offering with what they're expecting to enable that service to match what they need.
Absolutely. I think you said to me a little earlier before we start recording about, you know, you do undertake to do a lot of family celebrations and try and fit them into the space that you have. So
Yes.
your function room, as was for the hotel, you've converted that now. That's been taken away. And what was the logic behind that? Why did you remove that facility? And what have you replaced it with?
Right. So our function room was quite small for a function room. If we hosted weddings or funerals or any other sort of celebration of life or whatever up there, it was limited to, I'd say, comfortably 40 people seated. So when you've got that set up, and if then people say it is a wedding and they want to move into a nighttime event where they want to dance and things, sort of just the logistics of putting away all of the dining furniture and then making it into another space whilst people are still in that space, it just really wasn't feasible. Plus, you've got a very definite pull on your kitchen system where once you've got a wedding underway and you're serving X amount of people all at one go, then the people dining in the pub, you've basically got to stop service for that because you can't do the two things in tandem because you've got, you know, a limited space to be able to provide that. So really, from a food perspective, you weren't getting, it wasn't, from a purely business perspective, that wasn't profitable in that respect because you're stopping one service just to do another. So therefore, there's no gain there. And then you're limited again with numbers. So that was the main thing. So in order to sort of alleviate that and make sure that there is a constant revenue stream for that function room, we actually got permission to make that into 2 letting rooms. So we've added to the hotel capacity.
Yeah.
Knowing that's going to be a constant revenue stream for us rather than an intermittent revenue stream which stopped. So if you're thinking that you've got wet and sort of food sales at a function, the food sales really weren't anything more than what we would have generated in the main pub area anyway. So you might be getting a bit extra wet, but that was it.
Sure.
So it financially, it just makes sense to have a sort of a steady income stream rather than a hit and miss as and when people book a small venue for a smallish celebration.
Yeah, so you very much have got this split in sales between the wet, dry and the rooms. And as you say, increasing that room capacity to effectively create a more steady income across you. That investment, am I right in thinking that investment only comes about because you've gone free of tie? That you wouldn't have done that in any other respect, or you know, you've been tied, you're now free of tie. I mean, just give me the difference. What does it mean to you, and how's that actually work?
It makes a huge difference having choice of what to stock. It also makes, and we are still tied on draft, so we're still a little bit limited, but it also gives us some extra profitability, which enables us to grow the business, which wouldn't have been a possibility beforehand, because the Tide product was coming in at premium price. And as you know, in order to cover all of your overhead costs and your staff costs to serve it, you've got to add on a certain margin. And, you know, for some products, that was making that sort of out of reach. And to be honest, a little bit embarrassing as an offering to people, because it had to be at a certain price point in order for it to be behind the bar.
Sure, because even though you're ostensibly a destination venue, actually you're still servicing this community. So, you know, as you say, you can't expect everyone to pay a premium all the time. But it
Yes.
raises a really interesting point about, you know, here we are post-pandemic. There's a lot of stories about pubs closing, contracting, sales falling, struggling to get people to come out. You know, you are one of these success stories. You're doing something there which is really, you know, bucking that trend. And it's great to hear you've invested and you're putting more money down and putting rooms on and that, because, you know, trying to be agile and move your business forward. And that to me is just, you know, this is the kind of information and stories, you know, I like to hear. I don't always do doomy gloomy stuff, you know, on the pubs advisory service, but you know, I definitely like to hear about where people have made things a success and uncover a bit of that magic. I mean, what would you say? I mean, was it, you know, have there been mistakes in what you've done, or do you feel that, you know, what's worked really well for you? The rooms, obviously, we can tick that box. We can say that's working well.
Mhm.
Is there been a position that you've adopted with marketing that you didn't do in the early days that you now do that's making a difference? What do you think's worked there?
I think I think yes. You know, sometimes things are trial and error, and you think that you put something on, like our chefs wanted to do a bit more pastry work, so we put on afternoon tea, and you know, you kind of think, well, there'll be a big demand for that. But actually, some of these things are a slow grower, because people need to get used to the fact that you provide this service now.
Mm,
And then on top of that, think about you when they come to book something like that. So things that you put in place aren't always instant. And I always keep track of any new business sales, so we can actually see exactly what it's returning. And then, you know, we'll regularly review it to say, is this working? Do we still want to continue with it? Is it worth persevering? Does it need a bit more push on social media? You know, that it's a you can't just say, right, I'm delivering that and that's it. You just constantly have to keep it out there and keep it relevant.
mm,
It's little things like our chefs make their own focaccia bread every day fresh, and they started doing these amazing sandwiches. And one of the guys had posted, look at this sandwich that I'm having for my lunch. And then all of a sudden you get a dozen people coming in the next day wanting that sandwich. And sometimes it's as easy as that you just need to drive the demand by offering something that just looks really tasty. And,
mm.
you know, and then people come in off the back of it. And then they continue to come in because they've had a nice experience. And, you know, and sometimes that works vice versa, that, you know, somebody comes in and they're like, oh, I don't like that. And then you've got to fight to get them to come back and try something else. So
Sure.
customers, you know, are our absolute bread and butter. We need them. And also they can be, you know, pleasing them all of the time it is a difficult task.
It's feeding the monster, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that.
Well, obviously beautiful focaccias. Do you do a take? Is that a takeaway service that you've adapted there? Was this
No, we never did. We never went down the takeaway route during COVID. When we were locked down, we did look after staff, and we had a regular touch base with staff. But asking them to come into work it just wasn't anything that I wanted to do. We try and give all of the staff a nice work balance so that they want to work, that they enjoy their work, that we don't burn them out. And luckily we keep a real, we don't have a high turnover of staff where we are. So it's quite a nice little dysfunctional family, really.
Well, that helps you keep your standards, doesn't it? Because obviously everyone kind of is all aboard. They know what the vision is. They know where they're going with that. So, I mean, off the back of standards, and are you award winning? Are you going for any accreditations? What's happening
we
right now?
so we've been nominated. We're a Stonegate pub, so we've been nominated as best food venue a couple of times with them and been pipped at the post. But we know that we're up there, and we're just going down the road of Rosette accreditation. So that's new to us. Not that I think that we don't provide that level of service, but getting the accreditation and then keeping it will be another challenge for sure, I think.
Yeah, and so I mean, what drove you to go for the Rosette then? Was it they approached you, or was it something you had done the research on and you thought, yeah, there's a community of people that follow Rosette standard venues? How did it come about?
A bit of a mixture of all of those things, really. I think our food offering is at a level, has always been at a really, really high standard. And the chefs are proud of what they put out there. So part of it is to credit them really with the standard of food that they put out. Partly it is because there aren't any Rosette standard places in Hebden Bridge, so
Okay.
it will set us.
It'll get you on the map. Yeah.
Well, yes, hopefully. We've we never really marketed ourselves. We've always sort of been sat a bit quiet because the business has always been a constant there. And don't get me wrong, we're very lucky that Hebden Bridge is a busy, vibrant little place. But I think we're now starting to sort of shout a bit more about what we do, and that's definitely paying off. The room investment is now enabling us to look down the Rosette route. So after COVID, sort of there's been a lot of investment, which is a risk, especially in hospitality.
Sure.
But it's a calculated risk in that, we kind of strongly believe that if we build it, they will come. And have a nicer experience because the rooms are of a really nice standard now. And therefore that will then generate the return business, and they'll tell their friends and, etc. We're actually one of the top 10% of hotels in the globe on booking.com, which is
Wow.
quite incredible.
That's
really.
an accolade. My goodness.
I know, but it's crazy, right?
Did they tell you, or was you just aware?
No, yeah, we get notification from them. It's not the first time we've had it, but that probably gives you an idea of how many people book into us. We're busy on the hotel front, and it's quite unbelievable to think that we are in that sort of in the top 10%.
That's absolutely fantastic, Hayley. Congratulations. I didn't know I was speaking to a top 10 booking.com operator.
It's crazy.
I've always been massively impressed by how you approach business. I mean, your background, was it in hospitality? Did you work in a bar as a teenager? Did you have some other experience that brought you to this trade? Or, I mean, what were you doing?
So my family had a fish and chip shop, so from a very early age, serving customers was how we earned our pocket money. And but no, I was in banking and finance for many years. I've got some legal training, so hospitality, I think that if you can manage people and you can build a good team, then whatever your business is, and you have to have a passion for it as well. As hard as it is some days, serving 1,000 people and 999 of them are happy. It's the one that's not that sticks out in your mind, and that's wrong, because you should sort of celebrate all the things that you've done right. But it's hard not to, because that it's sort of personal. And you get TripAdvisor or whatever. I think some lady the other week had her gravy served on her pie, and I think her words were she was horrified, and it was like, really, because your gravy was, and so it's just kind of trying not to take people's nuances to heart.
You remind me of a pub I walked past in London, and it had an A board outside, and it said, why not come inside and try the worst coffee one woman on TripAdvisor has ever had?
I know, but right, TripAdvisor is a world for unhappy people.
Potentially. I must admit, I haven't dipped into it for quite a while. I think it was of interest in the early stage of that kind of social media development and providing an application for people. I mean, I think it belies perhaps not so much the changing nature of customers, but more giving them a voice. I think people were always there, potentially,
But you get then a lot of rogue stuff that hasn't even happened, and
they mix up your venue with someone else's,
and that's really or it's just their fake reviews, and that's really hard to deal with. I've never had it, but I know other local businesses have, and it's devastating for them. They work really hard, and it's something that is difficult to stop.
It's another thing you have to manage. I mean, for sure there's a lot of juggling, hopefully not too much struggling, but you're in it for risk and reward, and I get the sense that you're managing to balance that really well. You're taking risks, you're getting the rewards, you're managing to keep this business, in this area of Hebden Bridge, really well positioned. You're managing to service quite a wide, diverse people. I mean, as we know, some venues, in the on-trade, they are just one thing. They're a music venue, or they're 100% destination, or they're just wet-led lads and dads watching sports. You have to be quite a lot of things there, Hayley. It's a bit of a production, many hats.
It is, and quite often there's a lot of pageantry goes on, and we're part of the community as well. We hope there's book clubs, there's writing clubs. The WI come and crochet and make all sorts of things. So it really is sort of a bit of, you have to be all things to all men and women, and however many other genders there are now.
Well, indeed. I mean, I find it fascinating. I mean, I deal with a number of women and female operators around the country, and a lot of them are just solo operators. There isn't a partner there. They're running the whole show. You've been running the whole show there for a long time. I mean, you juggle so many plates, but you do it with such sort of aplomb. It really inspires me, and quite frankly, I think it should inspire a lot of other operators to, if not take the time and trouble to come and see your venue or look you up online and see exactly how you position this business, because undoubtedly the success is still coming for you, and that's against what has been a very, very difficult time in the UK for a variety of reasons, cost of living being one thing, other issues related to travel, people, Brexit, fuel costs, you name it, it's there. Have you found yourself constantly having to sort of reanalyze your suppliers and where you get your stock from, or have you kept steady with the people that you shop with?
Yes to all of those things. I mean, we have got a really good team that we've built who all care about where they work and what they do. And so I couldn't do what I do without every single one of them, down to, our housekeeping team, because every person has a direct sort of impact on the customer experience. And so everybody plays a really important part of that. And I think it's important that the staff know that as well. And there isn't any job in that place that I haven't done or won't do. So you'll quite often see me picking up cigarette ends in the beer garden because that's my glamorous job that I lead. And sort of somebody sent me an Instagram reel of this is what people perceive being a hotel, restaurant, bar owner is like. And this person's swanning in all dressed up. They're handing them a glass of champagne as they swan and have a glance at the new menu that's miraculously just appeared. And the reality is, you normally see me rocking up, we've been transforming the function rooms. So there's me taking out stuff in the back of my car to the tip because we can't get a skip round the back of our listed building, looking like I've been up a chimney, and picking up cigarette ends. So it's not all glamorous.
It's definitely not. That's a great leveler. That's like sort of the boss on the shop floor, isn't it? And I mean, you've maintained that, and perhaps that was your early sort of experience working in a fish and chip shop. It was a bit grubby, a bit oily, a bit dirty. So, maybe it put you in very good stead. But I think it's a good lesson there about, even though you have a busy venue, there's a lot of things to do. You're not afraid to do them, and you get out and show the staff. They can see you visibly. You're not just stuck in the office. You're in there getting stuck in.
Yeah, and I think that is important because people will then see that you care about, just the little details that matter, and that's mostly what customers notice as well, strangely enough. So I think it is crucial that you're willing to get your hands dirty as well.
Are you a publican navigating the choppy waters in the UK pub industry, or perhaps you're looking to get into the trade for the first time? The PUBS Advisory Service is here to help. We provide essential advice and support, from licensing and legal queries to tenancy agreements and business growth strategies. Want to unlock exclusive insights, in-depth guides, and all our past podcast episodes, including hidden extras? Subscribe to PASS today. Membership gives you unparalleled access to expert advice, ensuring your pub thrives. Visit pubs.expert to learn more and subscribe. Don't miss out. Empower your pub business with PUBS Advisory Service.
And it's a big team effort. Like, Billy and I, my general manager, who's like, a godsend, he, both of us have been on our hands and knees sanding, floors in the dining room and things. It's just something that we've always done, is that if there's a job to do, we just get on with it. And nobody's, we never get anybody who goes, oh, that's not my job, because they know that, I'll go and do it. In fact, they stop me doing some jobs, when there's a really sort of nasty job, they'll go, no, you're not doing that. And I'll go, no, I'll go in.
There's a bit of a battle over who's going to take ownership of it. It's fascinating. I mean, the business is, as you say, you occupy a building. It's been in that community for literally 400 years. Let's face it, half the nations on earth haven't been around 400 years. So, here you are running this. You're the custodian. You're the steward of this for this period of time. Do you think you've imparted your own brand onto this, or have you just adopted the brand of, the White Lion as it was?
I think that historically it's always been, as a coaching inn, has always been a place for people to have a drink, have something to eat, and rest their heads and their horses' heads as well.
Have you got stables?
Our courtyard rooms were the stables. So,
okay.
That's sort of, evolved as and when sort of people started to get cars and things. But I think that we do have a brand. It's very much, we're Yorkshire produce, Yorkshire, hospitality, Yorkshire portions on lots of the dishes. And I think you do need to have an identity. And, you know, I think locally people will come to us if they want something a bit more special, especially in the fine dining restaurant which we've opened. So, you know, hopefully we've got something for everybody, whether you just want to come in for a drink, whether you want a sandwich, or whether you're coming out for a really special occasion.
Well,
And I think that's probably key to the business that we're in, that I don't think you can be a one-trick pony anymore. And if you are, then you're very reliant on a certain demographic of people coming to you week in and week out, or day in and day out, for the same thing. And I think that the younger generation now don't come out to drink, definitely not like my generation did in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. There was very much a bigger drink culture, I think, then.
Oh, I agree. I was in that culture myself.
Me too.
Similar age. I mean, you have a clean, clear offer, and you have good standards, you know, that you maintain day in, day out.
Yes.
Hebden Bridge is obviously quite noisy. When I mean noisy, there's a lot of distractions for people that are looking for somewhere to eat and drink.
Oh,
You know, and
loads.
park their bum, rest their legs for half an hour. So
Yes.
you're competing with this noise, and you know, and trying to be very welcoming to these, you know, like you say, people that are non-resident, people that are wanting to stay. And I think it is quite the act to pull off, and to keep doing it, and not to alienate one group over another, especially perhaps in a place where it's quite tight, it's quite dense.
Yeah.
You know, as I said, the
Yes.
community is quite thick with it, and you know, I think more power to you that you've managed to pull that off, because it's definitely not easy. And I think the operators that I've found the most interesting in terms of success have been the ones that I think have really gotten a grip of their community that they're in, whether that's a backstreet London pub, whether that's another town in England or Wales, or you know, a community that services people that like walks in the hills or whatever. You know, they've really
Yes.
connected in with that and understood those people and got with them, and really probably not tried to shake up the offer too much and give them something they don't want, you know, like nose to tail eating, you know, in a medieval
Yes.
banqueting hall. That might not work.
No.
But equally, you know, I love what you said there about, you know, the focaccias have been a big hit just from social media, because that can happen, and you've
It's
embraced it.
and it's a powerful tool. I mean, you know, I guess my era was not born with social media, and so for me, it's still a bit of an unknown. But we've had several influencers come and stay and generate stories and reels and, you know, general sort of output from a stay at the White Lion. There's a girl who's got a beautiful little spaniel called Little Mellow, and he's got, you know, bloody a zillion followers, and he came to stay in one of the rooms, and, you know, was treated like a king, and that generated loads of interest for people, because we are pet friendly on you know, the outside rooms. So again, that's another thing that means that people are going to come and, you know, choose us to stay, because they know that they can go walking with the dog up in the Pennines, etc.
Do you have a rule on influencers? Do you expect them to pay full value for everything, or is there a deal done, or how does it work?
I think it's horses for courses, because I think we normally approached, or we have sometimes approached them. There's quite a famous guy on Instagram called the Yorkshireman, and he goes around a lot of Yorkshire venues. He'll try their food, he'll stay overnight, and he's got tons and tons of followers, and it's sort of our niche as well. So we approached him and said, you know, do you want to come and stay at the Lion? And depending on who they are and how many followers they are, depends on whether they charge you for staying as well as a complimentary stay. for us, I think you've just got to weigh up what you think you might benefit from out of that particular person, as to whether, you know, you're willing to donate that out of your marketing fund, because it's going to, you know, push you out onto, it'll sort of springboard other things.
Do you think that's a growing area for you then, in terms of marketing, that you can see yourself doing more of that, connecting with
Yeah, because I
influencers?
think that's how most people pick up on things now. Like, you know, gone are the days of brochures and people picking up flyers and things.
Mm.
If you're not sort of putting regular content out there, then I think you're easily overlooked, especially for visitors. Like, I know that we're on Instagram and we're on Facebook, and then lots of the youngsters are using TikTok and YouTube, which we haven't sort of delved into yet. And whilst it horrifies me a bit, it's just something that we might have to look into in order to, you know, keep up with how people are finding things to do, places to go.
Yeah, these conduits have definitely changed. I mean, I think my first exposure to this was probably back in, I don't know, I've got to say 2010, 11, round about then. I bumped into a publican on Westminster when we were campaigning one day, and he was telling me he used Facebook and he would pay for adverts, and
Yes.
he could dictate where those adverts went in
Mm-hmm.
terms of his region or his area.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you know, modestly he was spending, you know, about £5 a week. And but he was getting more than that, you know, because
Yes.
he was selling an extra 30, 40 quid's worth of beer.
Yes.
And he said people are searching for venues from Facebook. I found that
Yes.
amazing.
I know.
But it's a thing, right? It's a
It
big
is a
thing
thing.
now, you know. It's not just Facebook. As you say, Instagram is very visual. And, you know, if you've got a beautiful venue with lovely, you know, pictures and angles for people, they'll come. Do you in terms of your outdoor spaces, how much outdoor space do you have around the site?
So we've got a big cobbled area to the side. We've got a riverside garden, and we've got a space just outside of sort of within, it's not in the car park, but it's within sort of our curtilage. And we've just put planning permission in for a much more sort of formal seating area out there, so that we can be a bit more seasonal, and it's a much nicer experience for customers.
That's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of growth in pubs developing these outdoor spaces. Post-pandemic, it's become a real thing. So what sort of covers are you looking to get out of that? What do you think? How much development are we talking about?
So we currently have 5 sort of big picnic type tables out there, which will seat up to 8 people. So, you know, if they're all full, you've sort of got, you know, 40 odd to 50 people out there having a drink. The outdoor space will give us a bit more in terms of formal seats, if you like, in terms of if people want to eat out there, then it's a more comfortable, nicer experience. So we won't gain huge amount of covers, but there's a space for eating. There's a more sort of relaxed space. There's a space where people can just stand and rest a pint if they're, you know, nipping out for a cigarette or a vape or whatever. So it's more about the experience, whilst gaining a few covers, for us, especially if the work with the flood goes ahead with the Environment Agency, because it will then we'll still be able to use that portion of the car park whilst the works are going on. We've got a tiny car park. It probably holds about a dozen cars. It's a listed building. It was built for horses. It can be tricky if people don't park sort of uniformly, let's say.
Sure, absolutely. Or they drive absolutely enormous vehicle that
Yes.
the cyber trucks or whatever they're called.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. In fact, interesting that, electric cars have caused some problems for certain multi-story car parks because they're getting heavier and adding more
Yes.
load onto the
Yes.
floors. So, lot of changes coming. But I mean, it's good to hear you adapting. And I think we had spoken a while back, and you were talking about development of the outdoor and a little bit reticent because of the Environment Agency, what they're going to do.
Hmm.
Obviously,
Hmm.
they're quite slow moving at times, unlike the
Yes.
river, but
Yes.
they can take years to do things, and that can obviously hold you back. I mean, when we first met, you were getting towards the tail end of a long lease, so
Yes.
you've renewed. I
We
mean, so
have.
you're clearly doubling down. You're in, you're in for another period, which is
Yes.
great. I think it's suffice to say, renewal, easy, hard.
Very challenging, I would say.
Very challenging. That
Yeah.
I think you obviously one of my other podcasters, Stuart Catebread. I recommend if you haven't seen it, go and listen to that. There's a good discussion we have, me and him, about renewal and
Hmm.
how difficult it can be and the pitfalls and the problems. So absolutely, I'm happy to part that for another day if you want. If we
Yes.
can always come back and discuss what a wonderful time renewal can be for tenants. And suffice to say, I'm always going to say to people, get advice early on that issue.
Yes.
You've got deadlines. There are things in play. You could end up spending a lot of money fighting a renewal if you're not careful.
Absolutely.
So, you need to be fully aware of the strategies that can help. So, would you say, in terms of your experience of being at the Wildlife, was renewal the most difficult thing you've ever had to do out of
Yes.
all? Yes.
It was lengthy
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was hard. Partly because you can't plan. So you're sort of stuck whilst those negotiations are taking place because you can't move your business forward in case, the renewal doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So you are in a bit of a stalemate for a time until you know which direction you're taking. And then it can take a little bit of time after that to sort of recuperate from, putting everything on hold, if you like, because it's not just a case of, come day dot, everything's ready to roll because,
Mm.
you know, you physically have perhaps started to wind things down, or you haven't taken decisions which maybe you should have done at the time because you just simply can't commit to a contract with somebody because you don't know whether you're going to be in business, and there are lots and lots of factors to take into account on that front for
Mm.
sure.
It can be a massive headache, absolutely. It's interesting because obviously, in terms of other traders and people I talk to, people talk about the length of their agreements and 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And
Mhm.
what's never really quite spoken about is how much of that lease length could be eaten up by one issue,
Yeah. Yes.
i.e. renewal. And in fact, that, as you say, it could end up that you could spend 8.5 years going full tilt,
Yeah.
making money, investing, doing all these things. And
Mhm.
then literally towards the end, you're losing 10%, maybe a bit less of your agreement because you're in the limbo and things
Sure.
are uncertain. So, and as you say, you don't then just, as soon as you get the go ahead to get a new agreement, put your foot slam back on the gas again. It takes
No,
time to
and I
adapt.
think as well with some of the pubcos, their strategy have changed sort of mid negotiation. So, they start off in one place, but they end up in another place for lots of reasons. And then that just feels like a complete and utter waste of time, effort, money, advice, because all of a sudden, it sort of happened as it should have happened in the first place.
Mm.
And so it is challenging. And I guess as well, you've got to be sure that your business is worth that fight as well.
Sure. And perhaps that the relationship can survive it because, obviously you can get at loggerheads, talking
Yeah.
hypothetically here, you can get at loggerheads with your landlord over renewal, get into a real battle, many swords drawn, a lot of perhaps even
Yes.
blood being spilt. And then perhaps the relationship bang continues, a renewal is agreed, and you've got to rebuild this relationship or get back along with them. I mean, how for you now, how is it? How are you getting on with your landlords?
So we always had a good relationship with ours. We had a great business development manager. Not that he had a lot of work to do for us, because we had a clear sort of path which we were going down. So we didn't struggle with repairs and getting things done, support for charities and all sorts of things. So I have to say we've had a good relationship, even through the tougher times when negotiation was taking place. We were never a hostile party, because I think when that breaks down, you lose the ability to be able to have a frank discussion with each other, because you've let emotions get in the way. And don't get me wrong, it's definitely been times where that's been extremely challenging, but the door has always been open on both sides. And
I think that's a
even
good strategy, because Hayley, you struck me as someone, you're a businesswoman to your bootstraps, and I think you've always kept this door open, as you described, for the without prejudice discussions. To
yes,
try and find a common ground and work your way forward, and not just to like put in a red line, build a fence, build a trench,
yes,
bring in the missiles. You very much have, and I know that must eat away sometimes at people's soul to do that, but I think that is the business attitude, and that's what I think sets you apart from, other operators. You're able to do that and keep a clear head and keep the focus on what you want, without having to resort to, an absolute brawl. So I commend you fully for that.
well, thank
That's a
you.
really good posture, and I've often seen, postures, and sometimes I give best advice to people, and I've said to them, don't do that. I think that's a bad idea. Don't send that letter.
Yes.
But ultimately, I've never had that feeling with you. In fact, it's always felt a bit of the other way around when we've dealt with each other. I've always felt that I'm not approving, I'm consulting.
Yeah.
You're very much the approver, and that's how it should be. But it's been great to see that and see how you operate. And I think even though your customers see a different side of you, picking up cigarette butts and pouring them
Yes.
I see this other side, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to invite you onto this podcast, to kind of get that across to people, because a lot of the publicans and operators out there watch this show, want to get this feeling of how that works and how you can live with it day to day. And I mean, notwithstanding the fact you have this new lease, you've got a new period in front of you. Do you foresee any other big changes for the White Lion in the next 5 years? Have you got anything planned? Is it a secret? Are you able to tell me? Let me in.
No, I think we've gone through a really big and feels long period of investment. So we're trying to grow every revenue stream as far as we possibly can, so that we can. So you're maximizing your space. So there won't be a space that can't be utilized going forward, because it's quite sad to see the function room not booked every week, or or it's booked for a few drinks for a couple of hours. And in terms of having to have a staff member at the bar in there, and the maintenance of that space, to utilize that is going forward will be, I think, a much better use of space. So the outside space, if planning permitted, because they've come back with wanting a few documents, which we have to jump through a few hoops to have.
Hoops and hurdles, that's the way.
Yes, exactly. But we play the game quite as slowly, steadily. Hopefully we get that. And then I think we've pretty much maximized space. So then the only thing that we can look at then is making sure our offering is maximized, that we're giving people what they want.
This isn't, I mean, you dress it up in two wonderful sentences there, but what I'm getting, and I'm just thinking back to something you said a little earlier about, the analysis, the analytics that you undertake. How are you doing that? Are you just doing that like in your own diary? Do you have a bit of software? How are you analysing these things? Is it just poring over till receipts? Give me a bit of an insight as to how you're doing your analytics.
So we know what our hotel bookings are like. We know how busy Hebden Bridge is at weekends. So even if those new spaces are only taken very conservatively for one day a week, you know that those 2 rooms are going to turn over X. So you can work out then. So I keep track of everything that's spent on the new spaces as well, so that I can then tick off, and I log that every week alongside takings to say, right, in X amount of months, that investment will be paid off. And
So it's
then
an individual budget per
yes,
room almost.
yeah, I like
Okay.
to do it that way, because then
Right.
I can see when the investment has realized itself. And then you know that after that, that's increased revenue because you've paid off the costs of doing that piece of work. So everything I do on that, I keep a track of every cost down to, new mugs that go in there, so that I know I do, but
Pennywise,
it's
yeah.
how my brain works. And then every week that there are that an extra room is booked on any particular day, that's logged against that expense as revenue that's come as a result of having that space. And so you can sort of factor in conservatively when that investment will be repaid and when that starts to generate more revenue. And so, if it's out one day a week, then you know that it's going to take X amount of months to repay. If it's out 5 days a week, it's obviously going to be 5 times quicker to repay it. So we don't know how many people are going to take that room, but we know that at least it will go probably every weekend.
So you've got this track, you've got all these tracks in your mind and written down, you're logging this stuff and
Yes.
doing that. So are you trying to avoid cross-subsidizing anything in your mind and saying, oh, well, we didn't make as much from that, but we got that? Or do you keep everything? It sounds like it's all very siloed off to me,
It is, and I think that you have to, when you're running a diverse business, you have to. So I know what my wet GP is. I know what my food GP is. I know what we sell in snacks and dog snacks. I know what we do in rooms.
Yeah.
I know what we do in cocktails, which is a new, we brought that on board probably about 8 months ago. So anything that we've put in place that would generate extra revenue, I keep a track of, and we can see, is it worth it? So for cocktails, it's a no-brainer because you've already got all the stuff on. It meant staff training, but they get quite excited about putting special cocktails on. So they'll investigate that, do a bit of research, have a little try and go, yeah, we're going to put that on, or we'll pair that with a tasting menu as one of the courses. And so it's keeping people's interest ignited as well, and keeping that creativity and not sort of resting on your laurels. So yeah, I do silo everything. I know what the rooms make. I keep a track. I don't keep a track on that down to every bit of electricity and gas that's used.
Yeah. The days of coin operated meters in
yeah, exactly. But if there were those in place, I would do that as well.
Yeah. That's
and
takes
so
me back to the chalet holidays in the 70s.
I know. I know, right?
Oh, dear
And if
me.
you ran out of change, you were.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's so funny. But
so
no,
yeah, I do keep a siloed track on what sells and when, and I also keep a track on how it looks from year to year. And it's quite interesting that pretty much quieter periods follow a pattern. So we kind of can look at staff rotoring. For instance, we'll think, right, well, this week last year, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was quieter. It was busier on X because it was Father's Day. So you can make sure that your staffing levels, and sometimes, don't get me wrong, you get bit in the bum, but not often. And we've got quite a flexible team that can, sort of pick up if they get completely inundated. So that level of tracking also enables you to see where which revenues are bringing the money in on those quieter periods. So whether it's bar, front of house, kitchen, or housekeeping that you need.
Is it so? This sounds like some of your skills from the banking days have followed you here to the bit. Are you doing this all on a spreadsheet? Have you got some app? Have you got a whizzy bit of tech that you've done all this planning on? Or
I've got a pretty hefty spreadsheet now that's been developed over a number of years that I could probably sell off and make a nice little profit on.
Yeah, well, there's an opportunity to license a product there. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, make sure you've got a copy backed up to the cloud somewhere, just in
Oh
case.
yes, don't worry.
I
Absolutely.
think data management is something, that has increasingly become an issue for small businesses. The amount of data that people keep, and obviously there have been issues with hard drives falling over, cloud providers going out of business, all manner of potential pitfalls with handling data. And, it's definitely something that, as you were describing, you and me both come from an era where we're pre-internet, pre-home computing, really, and now learning all these things. And I think that's the next wave. AI is promising to do great things. I don't know if you've managed to adopt anything that way, but we all know hard drives and computers and storage has become a real thing, and obviously it's become a problem. How much do you keep and how long for, and the costs that go with it.
Well, that's the industry my husband's in, so we're quite focused. So there's always a hard drive that's kept off site that's regularly backed up with absolutely everything on, so that for instance, on holiday, I was in the middle of doing payroll and my laptop just died a death, like literally before my eyes. And it was like, oh no. And going around France trying to find somewhere that could download my hard drive and put it into a compatible laptop was an impossibility.
Oh dear.
So that focuses your mind very keenly on making sure you've got a backup and making sure you've got an alternative route into things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely another sort of almost member of staff that you've got to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to remember to do it because it's crucial stuff that you can't lose.
Absolutely critical, and obviously you were delayed coming on the podcast this morning because of a Teams problem. So
no, I had somebody take over my laptop remotely. So it was.
Dear. Well, that's a good thing. Some of these systems can be fixed remotely, and that's one of the very big positives that kind of butts against the over reliance on technology is actually having the ability to fix something from a distance. And I think we've all had experiences of searching YouTube on how to do something, like how to enter, what's this error code mean, how to pre-program this device, etc. So but it's still a steep learning curve, even for people like ourselves. So but look, Hayley, it's been fantastic chatting to you today.
Thank you.
Do you have any final thoughts, anything you want to promote about Hebden Bridge right now? What's it doing really well that you're proud about that's coming up this summer?
Last weekend they had a handmade parade, and there's a group of amazing people in Hebden Bridge that create these absolutely stunning puppets, and they go all over the country with these puppets, and they create that. They're all done with teams of local people. Everybody gets involved. There's stilt walkers. There's, real sort of art and crafts, sort of time and effort and community put into it. And, everybody lines the streets. They've got drums, and it was just an absolutely stunning event. And likewise, the Rotary Club and various other charities run several weekends. There's steampunk, there's vintage cars, there's always something going on, and I think that is what brings so much life to Hebden Bridge.
Yeah. Well, look, whatever's going on in Hebden Bridge, I thoroughly recommend people go and check it out. Visit you. I'm going to come up and see
Absolutely.
you, and enjoy standing on the terrace watching you pick up cigarette butts.
Yeah, indeed.
No, I won't ask you to do that. Don't worry. I don't smoke either, but yeah, no, don't shock me if you do that. But
No.
it's been wonderful chatting to you, and I look forward to chatting again. I'm sure we'll have some occasion to get you on a podcast and discuss some other things. Not all of them are going to be really long. Some of them are just going to be short, fun things, and we're hoping to serialize a number of podcasts with operators about more fun aspects of what's happened, ghost stories, etc., etc. That people have obviously started telling me about. So that'll be a good one to do. And as one guy told me, he found his chef sleeping in his bed. So
Oh,
what can we say? There's
wow.
plenty of trade stories. I'm sure we can
I'm sure there will be.
have a comedy show about. But lovely to see you again, Hayley.
And you?
Yeah, look forward to popping up and catching up with you again sometime.
Thanks, Chris.
Hello once again, this is Chris from PUBS Advisory Service. Thanks ever so much for listening to the podcast, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to get in touch with the show, please use WhatsApp. You can contact us on 07766 073815. That is 07766 073815. You'll also find this number in the links and on our webpage, pubs.expert/podcast. Thanks again.